Good evening, everyone. It's 7 o'clock. Those of you that have been here early would have been listening to the debate as to whether we give people a few minutes to clock in, but it's 7 o'clock to me, it's 7 o'clock. So welcome everyone to our September meeting, our first day of spring. I hope you all went outside and spent a few hours in the sunshine, got away from those computer screens and enjoyed the good weather, which is going to last for a couple of days, I hear. But good evening, and just as a reminder that this is being recorded and goes out onto the World Wide Web, so some of you may be famous, being looked at all over the world. I'm not too sure about Apple users, but in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen is a mute button, or looks like a microphone. If you just mute that, we won't hear the telephone ringing in the background or anything like that, and you know, it'll stop annoying people, the dog barking. But tonight we have two speakers, and before we introduce the speakers, we're going to put up two questions on the screen, and there's three answers to each question. We just want you to click on your answer to the questions, and then the speakers are interested in your answers, and then after you've done that, we'll start the formal part of the meeting. So Hugh's going to put the questions up. They should appear on your screen. Okay, the first one is, have you heard of citizen science? So you just click on yes, no, or maybe. And the second one is, do you participate in any citizen science projects? So you just click on your answer and then click submit down the bottom.
Does the SETI search classify as citizen science? Computer sharing?
Yes, it absolutely does. Yes, it does.
Peter, do you want to re-announce the purpose of the poll and how it's worked? There's a few late entries just been admitted.
Oh, okay. For those of you that have clocked on a bit late, up on your screen, there should be two poll questions. We're doing this before we introduce the speakers, as the speakers wish to know the answers to those three questions. So the first question is, have you heard of citizen science? You just click on the yes, no, or maybe box. The second question is do you participate in any citizen science project? The same. Yes, no, or maybe. So you just tick the box, and then I think it's submit down the bottom. And Hugh's getting all that, and I presume you'll put it up on the screen, Hugh, and we can all see it, and so the speakers will know.
The problem is not knowing what citizen science may be or may not be.
Thanks, Dave, and that's a lovely point, and hopefully things will be a bit clearer in about an hour's time.
I look forward to the presentation. Great.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, so we've had 42 people of 52 answers so far, so we might just give it one more minute and then I'll put the answers up. So if you haven't answered yet, then please do so in the next minute.
Can I change my answer?
I'm not sure.
Always one.
I'd forgotten about SETI. I was a big contributor many years ago.
I don't think you can, Sean, but what we could do is we could maybe run the poll at the end too, and then we could see whether folks realise actually they are doing or aren't doing some citizen science. Perhaps we could try and do that.
You happy with that, Hugh?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
As I think, girls, if you just let him know at the end that to run the poll again. How are we going, Hugh? We've now got 58 online. There's a few latecomers that aren't going to participate. Obviously, they'll wonder what it's all about.
I think we're ready to show the answers. We've had 3 minutes, so I'll end it for now and share the answers. So there we go. Everyone should be able to see now.
Okay. Okay, so I'll introduce our two speakers. We've got two speakers tonight. We've got Dr. Alison Motion and Michelle Neal. Alice is a chemist and a science communicator based, I've got to open this up, based at the University of Sydney. Her research focuses on open science and science communication, outreach, participation and education. I gather SCOPE is an acronym for it. Finding ways to connect people with science and to make research more accessible in the overreaching theme of Alice's interdisciplinary research. I should have practiced that word. Alice is the founder of the Breaking Good Project, a citizen science project that aims to empower high school and undergraduate students to achieve researchers in projects that will improve human health. She has a strong commitment to citizen science and is the co-chair of the University of Sydney's Citizen Science Node, which aims to enhance citizen science in Australia through research and practice. Alice will work with ACSA to strengthen participation in and impact of citizen science in our region. Michelle, in 2011, Michelle's young son presented her with a spider, a redback spider. After convincing her son not to pick up spiders, but to take pictures of them instead, Michelle soon found she had over 7,000 photos of all sorts of creatures and no idea what any of them were called. Thus, a citizen science. Thus, a citizen scientist is made. In May 2014, Michelle was invited by Earthwatch to attend the Australian Citizen Science Association inaugural workshop in Brisbane. She found herself co-chair of the Communications Working Group. Michelle and Jesse Oliver co-developed ASCA social media, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Since then, Michelle, with her orange-coloured iPad clutched firmly in one hand, has been an active social media moderator, poster and tweeter for the ASCA social media platforms. Having worked in analytical chemistry for over a decade, Michelle finds herself in an interesting place, a scientist as well as a citizen scientist with a passion for science communication. So with that, over to you girls.
Thanks so much, Peter, for the lovely introduction. Michelle and I are very glad to be joining you this evening. Before we start, we'd like to make an acknowledgement of country. And today I'm joining from the lands of the Gadigal and Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. ACSA acknowledges Australia's traditional owners and pays respect to the past and present elders of the nation's Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. We honour and celebrate the spiritual, cultural and customary connections of traditional owners to country and the biodiversity that forms part of that country. There is no place in Australia, water, land or air that has not been known, nurtured or loved by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. If you'd like to extend our acknowledgement of country in the chat today, we'd love to hear the traditional owners of the land that you join us from. And I know Michelle and myself, coming from other states, are very glad to be joining folks in Melbourne. I'm in New South Wales and currently in lockdown. I know this is something that many of you are used to too. So I hope you're doing very well and taking care of yourselves. And I hope that you enjoy our presentation this evening. So we're both from the Australian Citizen Science Association. And Michelle, I ask you to unmute for a second too. I think one of the things that's that Michelle and I share as a similarities that we're both chemists, which is actually an area of science that isn't really greatly explored in citizen science. And that's something that Michelle and I find a common connection over. Hey, Michelle, we talk about this quite a bit.
We do. About 93% of Australia's citizen science, and indeed probably the world's citizen science, is ecological in nature. But we find the physics, astronomy, that sort of stuff too, is also a big part too that doesn't get talked of as much. Over to you, Alice.
Yeah, we are extremely big fans of citizen science, particularly for what it can do in the ecological spaces, and for what it can do to help us understand our environment, and to help people to really want to take care of their environment and understand the species around them, both in cities and in more rural areas. But Michelle and I do have this secret soft spot for chemistry, which is our home discipline, and for trying to share chemistry through citizen science. And if you don't mind changing the slide for me, Michelle, that sort of explains a little bit of my background. So I'm an associate professor at the School of Chemistry at the University of Sydney. You can probably tell from my accent that I'm not originally from Australia. I trained as a chemist in the United Kingdom. I'm from a town halfway between Manchester and Liverpool, so my accent can go either way, but it's got a little bit of an Australian twang now, my friends and family at home tell me. And I trained as a chemist who is trained in making molecules. I moved to Australia to work on malaria research as part of the open source malaria consortium, trying to make new small molecules to be tested against malaria. One of the exciting things about my work there was that I joined a consortium founded by Professor Matthew Todd that aimed to try and find new medicines in a new way by trying to open up the process and removing the secrecy that's often a part of making new medicines. And one of the things that enabled was for us to start working with people who don't usually get involved in medicine synthesis. So high school students and undergraduate students, and trying to devise lessons where they could make new malarial candidates, and also on occasion to recreate medicines that had become rather expensive. And that's where the Breaking Good project was formed. I'm not sure if any of you have watched the American TV show Breaking Bad or heard of it, but this series was based on a high school teacher and a former student making illicit substances that they should not have been making. And so our project is a play on the name of that show, because we only work on medicines that matter. We're not making anything illicit or anything of that nature. We got a little bit of press coverage, in fact, quite wide press coverage back in 2016, because a group of high school students in Sydney recreated a medicine that had been hiked in price very cheaply. And we've been working with schools and undergrads ever since. And just as a little bit more context, because today we are going to be focusing mainly on online citizen science projects, which is almost all citizen science projects in lots of ways. But we're focusing on the online partly because of who you are, the MelbPC users group, and we thought that would appeal to you. But also because many of us are not able to spend as much time outdoors at the moment. And also there's an accessibility of using using the World Wide Web to contribute to science. So just a little bit more about me. The second part of my slide has this newsflash, price hikes, and circle of life icons. And these are from a new Breaking Good project, because usually we work with young people to make new molecules. But because of COVID, we weren't able to do that. We weren't able to go into schools. The university at the moment is operating from home. So we devised an online project called Essential Medicines that tried to engage citizens in understanding more about the pricing of medicines and their stories, so that we can try and build a database about medicine accessibility. And I might talk a little bit more about that later. But for now, we'll move on to what some of the questions have sort of been foreshadowing. And that's, what is citizen science? So essentially, citizen science first was coined as a term in the mid-90s, jointly by two scholars. one in the United States, one in the UK, who were thinking about defining a way of working between citizens and the way of participating between researchers and universities, between experts and non-experts who were exploring scientific questions. I don't know if anybody knows the names of these folks. I might just leave that as a question for a moment and we'll come back to them. But in case there's any budding citizen scientists out there or anybody who's involved in citizen science, but we'll come back to these people in a moment. Perhaps Michelle will change the slide for me. So this is a term that came into widespread use in the mid-90s. And essentially it is citizen science involves public participation and collaboration in scientific research with the aim to increase scientific knowledge. Now, citizen science is much older than the mid-90s, and you could argue that it traces back to the beginning of the first science research, where people weren't formally trained, but they were working things out for themselves. But it is an area of research and an area of expansive growth in science engagement that has really, really flourished and blossomed in the last 10 years. And the reason, Michelle will speak a little bit for herself now, for herself later, but the reason Michelle and I, some of the reasons Michelle and I and others are very keen on citizen science is that we think it's a wonderful way for people who aren't necessarily trained as scientists to contribute to research and to understand more about the world around them. But also we realize that there are lots of scientific questions or research questions that can't be answered just in universities or research institutions. They need people. Sometimes we can't cover the amount of area that we need to cover. So there's some projects that are looking about birds and other species that are in remote parts of Australia that you could just never possibly cover with researchers alone. And some of these projects would just not be possible without community contributions, because the ideas for the projects themselves come from the community. There might be a question that people want to know about where they live or the area that they live in, and they might pose a research question in citizen science. Next slide, please, Michelle. So here are some other members of ACSA. So I won't stay on this slide for too long, but essentially the Australian Citizen Science Association, that we'll sometimes call ACSA interchangeably in this talk, and this is the organisation that we're both on the management committee for, was formed in 2014, I believe, and the idea was to have an Australian-based approach to citizen science and to support and advocate for citizen science in the country that we all reside in and share together. And this organization or the association do a lot of work to try and advocate for citizen science in Australia and to support practitioners who are working in this space. And if you want to find out more about this, Michelle will share some links later, but we have our conference coming up in October. And you can join the association. We'd love for some folks to join our association and to get involved in some of the work that we do in ACSA. Next slide, please, Michelle. So here are some stats. These were put together by our chair, Erin Roger, and my apologies that they are a little bit out of date. These are from the 2019 to the 2020 financial year, and I haven't updated these slides. But we're sitting at, we're sort of in the mid 400s for members. We have just under 30 organizational members. We usually get around just under 30 new subscribers a month. We send out newsletters. We let people know about what's happening. You can see that Victoria has a very healthy membership along with New South Wales, and the membership sort of corresponds to the population of the states. But we have state chapters too. We have we have lots of events that are organized in the individual states and territories, as well as a central management committee. And there are people from universities, there are people from organizations outside of universities, there are NGOs, there are charities, there are people who are working as individuals, all of them trying to build citizen science projects. And if you could change the slide, please, Michelle, that would be great. And again, these stats are a little bit out of date. Michelle is our social media guru who works so hard to keep social media running really smoothly. I just clicked back a couple of slides, that's okay. So we have a YouTube channel that you can look at. We have a Facebook, we have a Twitter account. We have over 400 members on LinkedIn. We have an Instagram. So if you're on any of these platforms, give us a follow and see if you can, if you enjoy seeing what ACSA are up to and what our members are up to. And Michelle is forever sharing projects and updates from projects, so you can see if there's anything you'd like to get involved in. Next slide, please, Michelle. So there are 10 principles of citizen science as published by the Australian Citizen Science Association. And I'm not going to read all of these now or ask you to read all of them. I put a link here to a website that includes these 10 principles of citizen science. But these are the guiding principles for defining citizen science projects that are functioning well here within an Australian context. And essentially, you could summarize a lot of these by saying that there is full participation between citizen scientists and scientists in these projects, so that people are fully involved in asking research questions, trying to answer them. They have to have a genuine scientific outcome. They're different to science communication projects, although science communication is really a part of it. Essentially, citizens are very deeply involved in the research questions and generating the data, and can influence the trajectory of the projects too. So if you want to find out more about the principles or indeed anything else, you can have a look at the ACSA website, and we'll post some links in the chat. Next slide, please, Michelle. We're not the only citizen science association in the world, which is great news. There are very active associations in USA. That's the Citizen Science Organization, or CSA, sorry, which is up top. So you can have a look at citizenscience.org. There's the European Citizen Science Association, which is also called ACSA, which sometimes sounds a little bit like ACSA. We have Citizen Science Asia, and there's also the Citizen Science Africa Association. And if we go to the next slide, what's great is that these associations work very actively together. Now, in terms of citizen science, one of the key things that we would like to tap into today is that we know that Australians spend on average about a third of their day in front of screens, and that you know, rather than just scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through Facebook or scrolling through other forms of social media, we could engage people to start answering scientific questions or contributing data. People can be a part of really answering or providing some solutions to even some of the biggest societal challenges that we have in terms of understanding about our ecology, about understanding about our environment. And so engaging people to maybe move a little bit off social media, unless they're looking at ACSA channels, of course, and to participate in citizen science is something that we're really keen to do. There are many changes that are anticipated, both in response to technology, people realizing that they can add data that really adds value, and really, as we see more and more platforms for people to share their ideas and to crowdsource ideas, and as technologies develop, we think there's a real growth area for citizen science, and this will be some of the things that you folks are expert in as the PC users group. Next slide, please, Michelle. So this is an image from some of our colleagues with some folks from citizen science associations around the world in Kenya in 2017, where ACSA is part of a citizen science global partnership that has been part of United Nations committees, such as this one here, and has worked together on citizen science to support things like the Sustainable Development Goals, Earth Challenge 2020, the European Union's Horizon 2020, and recommendations from UNESCO. And so there are folks doing a lot of work to try and influence policy decisions with regard to citizen science and involving members of the public in answering research questions. Next slide, please, Michelle. And this is just, I won't spend too long on this slide because I know Michelle's going to introduce you to the Citizen Science Project Finder in a little while. But one of the things that we have on the ACSA website is the Citizen Science Project Finder. So if you want to find a citizen science project near to you that perhaps you would like to do with your friends, with your colleagues, with your family, perhaps with your grandchildren, you can find citizen science projects that are in your region and that intersect with some of your interests, whether you're particularly interested in birds, for example, or particularly interested in the coastline, or if you're interested in chemistry even, you can have a look and find a project. And there are over 500 projects on there. We can share information much more quickly, and really trying to make Australian projects not just accessible to Australians, but also accessible to colleagues around the world. And you can have a look. There are other platforms too that host lots of citizen science projects, including SciStarter and other platforms such as Zooniverse that you might come across as you become more and more interested in citizen science, which we hope you will after today. Next slide, please, Michelle. So citizen science is increasingly being included in policy in Australia, and these are just some of the examples of the way that ACSA has supported citizen science in policy ideas and policy changes. So, for example, the strategy for nature, state strategies such as the Queensland Citizen Science Strategy, which Michelle will know all about, joining us from Queensland. Some significant work more recently has been in the State of Environment reports, influencing or giving feedback to government departments or even chief scientists, thinking about how we can, build Australia through citizen science was a part of an occasional paper series. If we just move on now, Michelle. This is just one example of how ACSA has been part of discussions about how citizen science can influence policy in Australia, in particular from the CSIRO. This was, sorry, excuse me, I'm stumbling here. In response to the bushfires in late 2019, citizen science emerged as a direct outcome from the Bushfire Science Roundtable, which our chair, Dr. Erin Roger, has been really heavily involved in, and is a wonderful advocate for citizen science working in the space. And CSIRO approached ACSA to work on processes that would identify ways that the public could engage in citizen science projects and to try and make this data as useful as possible. And citizen science emerged as one of the important outcomes of this report, for example. Now, we have seen some absolutely beautiful citizen science projects in response to the bushfires. One of the outcomes we saw from Casey Kirchhoff, who was working on taking photographs of a bushfire affected area and uploading them to citizen science platforms to monitor the way that the bush had regenerated. And there are many other examples too. So increasingly, we're seeing that citizen science can play a really important role, even on some of the biggest questions or the biggest problems of our time, including things like the report on climate and disaster resilience. And Michelle, could we just click to the next one, please? So this is the Citizen Science Bushfire Project Finder, where you can find specific citizen science projects that are for bushfire recovery and resilience. And we can share a link to that too in the chat if you're interested in monitoring or being part of citizen science projects in response to bushfires, for example. The next slide, please, Michelle. So this is an article that you could read if you wanted to find a little bit more about the citizen science response to the bushfire. So this is an article that's written by our chair, Erin Roger, together with the then chief scientist, Alan Finkel. From Kangaroo Island to Malakuta, citizen scientists proved vital to Australia's bushfire recovery. So this is a place that you can find a little bit more out. And this is just one example of ACSA's work in recent years. Next slide, please, Michelle. There's also significant investment in citizen science in Australia, and this is something that we find really encouraging. Particularly, I'll draw your attention to the central one. There's been some Commonwealth funded citizen science grants of, I think, up to 6.3 million in total to date, and it would be great to see more of these happening to fund research happening in universities, in partnership with universities, in communities outside of institutions, and particularly something that we're fond of is seeing different organisations coming together with community groups and working to try and solve questions together. There have also been significant funds from philanthropic organisations and through some government organisations too. So we're always keeping an eye out for opportunities for funding and investment in citizen science in Australia. And I think certainly from my perspective, I shouldn't speak on behalf of everybody, but it would be great to see those opportunities increasing, particularly where communities are able to devise and co-create their own citizen science projects to answer questions that are pertinent to specific community groups. Next slide, please, Michelle. So one of the articles that we wrote last year, I was a co-author on this article together with lots of other people, was a citizen science article that told people how they could contribute to coronavirus research without leaving the house. So as well as getting vaccinated and following health advice and trying to keep people safe that way, there are actually a number of citizen science projects where you can contribute to research that is impacting the coronavirus research effort. One of these projects we used with my undergraduate class last year. It's Fold It. It's a project that looks at protein structures and how they're folded. And the students in my class, but you could do this too, you can join in at home, were trying to fold protein structures that would bind to the coronavirus spike protein and see if this could contribute to research and understanding about the coronavirus and possible treatments or preventions in the form of vaccines or other medicines. So there are a number of projects that are actually contributing to coronavirus research, and you can find out a little bit more from this article too. Next slide, please, Michelle. So I'm going to wrap up there as hopefully giving you a little bit of an introduction about citizen science in general and in Australia. And if you want to have a go at the Essential Medicines Project, I will tell you a little bit more about that if we have time later. But essentially, the project is all about understanding the accessibility of medicines and trying to point out that they should be accessible to everyone. And if I have a bit more time, I'll tell you about that later. But I'm going to thank you for now and hand over to Michelle, who's going to introduce a bit more about herself and her link to citizen science, but also show you some examples of some citizen science projects that you might want to get involved in. So thanks so much, Michelle.
Thanks, Alice. Thank you for a great presentation. My name is Michelle Neal. I'm with the Australian Citizen Science Association. I'm a volunteer. These are my kids. This is William and David. William, the one at the bottom there in the stripy shirt, was the one who actually found the spider originally. He was 18 months old. But they're both very keen citizen scientists. This was us at the Kalula BioBlitz 2 years ago. And again, earlier this year, we went as well. But what they're doing there is they're doing online citizen science, but outdoors. So they're actually doing that on their iPads. They're looking up stuff and they're documenting it using an app called iNaturalist. But more of that in a minute. So we mentioned before, Alice mentioned before about the Citizen Science Project Finder. Here is the link to the Project Finder. And when you open up the the picture, it looks a bit like this, and you can click on which state you are in. So once you clicked on your state, you can then go in a bit further. So I'm going to actually stop sharing that and share a different screen and show you how it works. I want to get out of, sorry, technicals. It's not going to let me. Hang on a sec. It's decided it. There we go. That's better. All right, let me try this again. All right, you should be able to see. This is the Australian Citizen Science Association website. If we come up the top here where it says resources, I'll just make that a bit bigger so people can see it on their screens. We've got the project finder. Down the bottom here is also those 10 principles of citizen science that Alice was talking about. There's also some photos here too, that you can look at people actually doing citizen science as well. And there's the Bushfire project finder here. So if we go down, let's just wait till it loads. Come on. No, there we go. There's what it's loaded now. So if we go down to Victoria and we click on Victoria, it will take us into Victorian citizen science projects. And then you can drill down to see where you are. So I'm just going to, I'm not sure why that's asking me to log in there. Anyway. All right, we'll try that again. Keeps trying to make me do this. There we go. Go in this way. All right, so let's go down here on the left-hand side, Australian state. We'll pick Victoria, which is down a bit. We'll pick only active ones and refine. So currently in Victoria, there is 246 citizen science projects that you can get involved in. Let's say we only want to do participate at home. Now we're down to 66, but that's still a fair amount there. So Astra Quest, Bush Blitz, Bandicoot Sightings, Butterflies Australia, Big City Birds. As you can see, even NASA has one. This one here is a NASA-based one. Feeling bored, want to go outside and have a look around, have a look up. And then there's a project here with CSIRO and NASA's Globe that actually says how they're looking at how satellites look at the ground. Okay, so like I said, there's plenty there. Going to go back to my presentation. One of the other ones that's lots of fun to do is camera trap images. So we usually have a number of projects where citizen scientists can review and identify fauna images captured on camera traps. You'll find this usually happens a lot during National Science Week, but it's not always camera traps for flora. This year it was actually camera traps for coral as well. So this one's actually called Digivol, the one I'm showing here, and that's looking at some of the bushfire recovery as well on Dunnart Island, on Dunnarts on Kangaroo Island. Alice before was talking about the Environment Recovery Project. So that's actually on iNaturalist, and I will show you that in a minute. But just to show you, this is the extent of those bushfires here in Victoria as well. And at the moment, they have 9,112 observations, and they're always looking for more. If you want specifically Victorian citizen science projects, the EPA actually has quite a few. In a Melbourne air monitoring, as well as a regional Victoria zinc mapping, depending on where you are in Victoria. Bendigo air monitoring as well. So if you want to have a look on the EPA website for Victoria, they have quite a few of their own citizen science projects too. And all of those projects actually go towards understanding what people are actually seeing, smelling, hearing, tasting, etc. In their local area, and therefore how the EPA can fix any problems that may be happening and that they're not aware of. So yeah, it's a good one to have a look at. One of the things I did want to point out is, well, is how I'm actually involved in citizen science as well. So as Alice said, I'm an analytical chemist, and not a lot of analytical citizen science out there, but there is a lot of environmental ones. So the last couple of years, I've been putting my local area in for City Nature Challenge. Last year after City Nature Challenge, when we're all still in lockdown, we realized that the City Nature Challenge, which is an American-run global biodiversity BioBlitz event, is really based at the wrong time of year. It's based in April, and that's the wrong time of year for biodiversity in Australia, or indeed in the Southern Hemisphere. So some of the other Aussie organisers and I got together and we decided we'd do one for the Southern Hemisphere, because everything you usually get online is usually very Northern Hemisphere based. So we wanted to do something for ourselves. So thus the Great Southern BioBlitz was formed. So last year in the Great Southern BioBlitz in September, we had 91,158 observations. Now, we thought when we first started this, we did this with about 3 months notice and just put it all together using iNaturalist. And we thought, look, maybe 10, 20, 30 areas might get involved if we're lucky. We had 154 in the end on 3 continents and 12 countries. It was amazing. It was amazing. It really was. This year, we're having the Great Southern BioBlitz a little bit later in October. And it's the 22nd to 25th of October. All you need to do for that is, if you're the sort of person who prefers to go out and actually take pictures with a real camera, that is absolutely okay. Because there's 2 ways you can actually do this. You can take pictures with a real camera, bring them back to your computer and upload them to iNaturalist.org, or you can download the app on a phone, take the pictures with the phone and upload them that way. So there is several different ways you can do this. So I might actually just show you while we're here, iNaturalist. So when I log into iNaturalist, this is what I get. And it's just iNaturalist.org. In here, you have your profile, observations, edit observations, and calendar. IDs, lists, journals, favorites, and projects. So if I show you last year's project, my computer is being a little bit slow here. My apologies, everyone. Might have to come back to it. And if I show you last year's umbrella project. So these are how many observations people made. So observers, this number will come up here. 3,150 people took part across the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. And there's all the places, including Melbourne, Metro East, that took place. Just as it loads. You can see how many places in Australia took place, particularly in Victoria. We were quite impressed with how well Victoria took this on, to be honest, and we are hoping for big things this year as well. Okay. So iNaturalist, let me just share this as in. iNaturalist is actually run here in Australia by the Atlas of Living Australia as the Australian node iNaturalist is originally an American based app and platform, but they've asked different areas of the world to be nodes. So that means that all of the things that we do here in Australia actually goes to the Atlas of Living Australia. So Atlas of Living Australia is run by CSIRO, and it's basically our biodiversity portal into Australia. So this is then used to inform policy. You know, where are the koalas? How long since we last saw a koala in this area? Are they getting sick? What's happening to the frogs? So all of these sort of things, questions and more is basically what's being asked in this portal. Now, this is where it gets interesting. We can go into the Atlas of Living Australia, which is what it looks like here. You can contribute. You can upload species, record a sighting, transcribe and digitize, which is the Digivol one I was talking about, and discover more citizen science projects with the Citizen Science Association Project Finder. Oops, it's logged me out. Let's see if it does it this way. Nope, it's not going to like me today. Oh, there we go. Now it's back again. So once you're actually in Atlas of Living Australia, you can search and analyze. So let's say we're looking for an interesting species near you. If we then ask for it, because it has the conservation statuses as well down here. We can actually see in here how many there are in Australia, how many records there are, including Tasmania, which I find is really interesting. But then you can also go in and see where they are near you. So you can actually zoom in and find out who's seen one near you, where would you go to see one, and see if you can go and find one on I know you're not supposed to go too far from home on your walks and so forth, but you know, see if you can find one in your local area and add it to the database using iNaturalist, and it will end up in here. Okay. We also talked about SciStarter. I know Alice mentioned SciStarter. I think they've changed it to .com.
Too many W's.
Oh, is that what it is? Internet today is not helping me. This would be much faster if my internet would work. All right, we'll skip that for now, but I will come back to it later when it's working. One of the other ones she also mentioned was Zooniverse. Zooniverse is great fun. The link for it is down here on the left-hand side, but you can do everything from cosmological jellyfish to buzzy bee African pollinators. This is what I meant by saying if you want to go on a virtual holiday, go into Snapshot LEC and look at the Serengeti and see if you can find lions and tigers out there. It's lots of fun. I promise you will get hooked. There's also RattleCam to see if there's rattlesnakes coming up to a camera as well. So lots of different ones. These are one of the things that one of our friends, Erin Roger, our chair, put together with some of our members. But it's one of the things that I love about citizen science is because not only is there community spirit, you're saving the planet as well. And everyone can actually make a difference for it, which is one of the things I like. You're using technology for it, you're still keeping that curiosity, and you're still finding interesting things out as well. As Alice also mentioned, we do have membership fees. Here is our fee structure here on the left. And our online Citizen Science Association conference is coming up, and I've put that in on the right if you want to, if you would like to join us. Now let's just see if it will. I've also put some links in here as well of all the things we've talked about, most of the things we've talked about here today. So this will be available to everyone at the end of this presentation. I'll put them in the chat. And I'm going to stop the share, but I'm going to try and go back to that SciStarter again. The SciStarter is a lot of fun. Because if we turn this to online, and let's say, okay, someone put something in the chat that is their favorite thing to do. Ready, set, go. What's your favorite thing? Do you have a favorite hobby? Do you have a favorite, you know, something you like to do? Do you like to bake? Do you like to go for walks? Do you like to? Anyone?
Drinking wine.
Drinking wine. Okay, let's do that one then. Wine. Nothing there online. I'm sure you get some that would be good to do. Let me do food instead. Maybe we'll get a few in there. So here's a few here. Tropical investigations, global fishing wash. Anyone who likes fishing? There's quite a few citizen science projects actually to do with water. We have quite a few of them in Australia. One of my favorite ones is, and I'll find it here. I know we can't go outside at the moment, but this is actually fun. If you're feeling like you're missing fishing, it's actually fun to go online and see what these other people are finding around Australia. So this one was originally set up as in response to climate change, and it does involve an app, but you can actually see what people have spotted around the place as well, because it comes up here. Every 2 seconds there's a new one. Someone spotted something else. So it's lots of fun. I do know that there is a wine one, Alice, but it's here in Australia. I have another one we can try. What about, everyone was going nuts during lockdown, well, the last lockdown, one of the last lockdown, for sourdough. Might be two. I know there was a sourdough project that they had at one stage as well. And it's called Sourdough for Science. And you can make your sourdough and actually send it off to the boffins, and they will tell you what sort of microbes you have in it. So yeah, lots of fun, lots of different ones you can do. Particularly,
someone's put up hobby electronics.
Hobby electronics, sure. So that's very much your DIY type of things. So a lot of things at the moment is study at home is those hobby electronics, but also making these low cost air quality sensors as well. That's another one you can do. And you can use that anywhere on the planet. So yeah, this is something we're actually trying to set up here. I'm a scout leader as well, and this is something we're trying to set up here with our scouts. Imagine if you would have air quality testing sites in every single scout hut in Australia. There's hundreds and hundreds of scouts in Australia. Why don't put them as sensors, as citizen scientists? So this is something we're actually looking at doing with our scouts as well. So let me just go back to our user group, and we're up to the final one, which is question time. So we've given you a very, very quick overview of citizen science in Australia and the world. Also, a couple of examples of different projects. So I'm just going to stop my share now, and if anyone has any questions, Yep, some of the members are involved in home automation and as a consequence collecting energy usage and environmental data. Well, that's actually technically a citizen science project if there is an outcome out of that. So yeah, you can have, yes, that's right. And Alice has said the Australian Wine Research Institute was just awarded a citizen science grant. So for those of you who like your wine, watch this space. There is a wine citizen science project coming to you very soon. But if you'd like to unmute or ask us
I feel like
questions,
we might have a few volunteers who would like to be participants in that wine citizen science project, perhaps on the call.
Quite possibly. So yes. Hugh, did you want to put up that next poll, if that's okay?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So now that we've had a little chat to you about citizen science in Australia, how do you answer this poll now? I will say as well that over in New Zealand, there's a really cool project in electric vehicles, where the electric vehicle user group over there is actually doing all of their data and then feeding all their data back into Tesla and, Leaf and all those guys who are actually making these electric vehicles to try and get them to be better for their environment as well, particularly perform better on their roads. So there's pretty much name me anything and there's probably a citizen science project we can tell you about. There's so many of them.
Michelle or Alice, if I decided I'd like to investigate, had an interest in butterflies and I offered my services, would there be someone that's got a lot of knowledge on butterflies that would tell me what to do?
There's actually an app for that. And a website called Butterflies Australia. So if you have a look at the Butterflies Australia website, they can tell you on there. There's the app as well you can use. Alternatively, you can put it into iNaturalist as well. Alice, did you have any other ones?
Yeah, I think the key thing there, I think, Peter, is that there are experts at hand that you can hear from who will give talks as part of those different citizen science projects on occasion. You can also, there's a lot of resources, and there's also, you kind of end up learning more about butterflies as you take part in the citizen science project. So say, for example, you've noticed a species that you're not sure of the name of, you might take a photograph and then find out information about trying to work out what species it is. And I'm not sure if this has ever happened for the butterflies projects, Michelle, but there are examples of people discovering new species through citizen science projects. So there are even some examples of some citizen scientists having species named after them. So it can be pretty exciting, and you can learn, as you go, and sort of gather those photos while you're doing something else, while you're on your daily walk or as part of your daily routine. So depending on, how keen you are, some people will, dedicate many hours to these each week, and other people will just take photographs as and when they see a butterfly or as and when they see a bird. So there are some fantastic projects out there. And as Michelle said, many of them come with an app, either a web app or a mobile app that can assist folks with uploading data.
And someone just said one of the members studies bees. OzPollinatorCount.com is another one. So this one, they actually have 2 times a year that they do the Oz Pollinators count. And that's literally going outside. You go to their website, you download the piece of paper, print it off, sit outside in the sun for 10 minutes and watch a flower. 3D printing projects, yes, that's another one. If you go, I know it's here in Queensland, it's this way, but in Queensland, our state library actually has citizen science projects for 3D printing stuff. So yeah, there is out there as well. And sometimes it can be simple as 3D printing, you know, those, I was talking before about those cheap air quality monitors, 3D printing that, the outside of that is one of the things you can do with that. Birds in the garden, there's Backyard Bird Count, there's BirdLife Australia, there's BirdLife Victoria, there's eBird, Erema Bird, there's, yeah, lots and lots. One of my favorite ones is Big City Birds. So you know how you're in the city, or you be somewhere around where there's a lot of people, a lot of houses or something like that, suburbia or whatever, and you're seeing birds doing unusual things. They might be opening a bin to get at the food inside. They might be being somewhere they haven't been before and acting unusually or something like that. The Big City Birds is an app and a website, and it's asking people to go through and tell them when birds are behaving weirdly. Okay, so I will put up the link to that one.
This one's a fantastic project. There was it was featured on the ABC and across some news platforms, I think a couple of weeks ago, particularly looking at, I think it was sulfur crested cockatoos opening up bins and foraging for food, you know, a learned behavior in their environment, and seeing the way that they're changing in response to urban areas and urban conditions. And I think there's a great emphasis in many of these projects is that, you know, there are lots of places to explore nature. So for some of you, you may be fortunate enough to live in bushlands, in areas where there's a lot of, you know, near to forests, near to rainforests. But even if we're living in urban environments, there's a whole host of biodiversity for us to observe and to contribute data towards. So that's one of the reasons I like this project so much.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, that one too. There is an app for it as well, or as there's the website. And it's actually run by Taronga Park Zoo. Now, someone's just asked me about fungi. FungiMap is the Australian Citizen Science project for fungus. Now, I've just put the link in the chat. Now, one of the things I will say, it's usually run now on iNaturalist platform. So again, you can take photos or use the app, and you just have to join the project on there as well. There's lots of how-tos on little how-to videos on iNaturalist, so there's plenty of ways to do that. One of the things I will say, if you are taking photos of fungi, it's very, very important, particularly if you've got like a nice like toadstool type one, you know, the classic mushroom, is to take photos underneath the gills, because many times the experts need to see what the actual pollinating parts are under the gills before they can tell you what type of fungus it is.
And for those of you who are interested in sort of a related species, there's a fantastic talk up on the ACSA website by a wonderful citizen scientist, Teresa van der Heul, who's an expert in slime molds or Myxomycetes. And she's one of the people who's had a species named after her from exploring her local rainforest, which is quite a small area of rainforest. And these slime molds, you could easily walk past them. They're really small, but when you get photographs of some of these amazing, the beautiful, bright, they almost look otherworldly. And so there are citizen scientists exploring, you know, things from the floors of our forests and our urban areas too, right up to looking into the skies, looking up into space. So there really is something for everybody. And if there isn't a project that quite aligns with what you're interested in, you could always think about starting your own citizen science project and thinking about what you might want to explore in your community.
Mm-hmm. Something simple like, where does all the rubbish go? Where I always see this one plastic bag rolling down my street, where does it end up? Where is it coming from? Something as simple as that can actually move mountains.
Conversely, putting it the other way, there's someone in my local area, say, or the local council would probably do it, but they're interested in what weeds are in the parks. how do you, and someone's interested in that, how do they get the message out to me? I'm not thinking of joining, I have no interest in anything, but suddenly I find out they're interested in what weeds are growing in my neighbourhood. And, oh, I think that's interesting. How do they get that message out to me?
That's such a good question, Peter. So I think that's one of the issues that most of these projects have, even the ones that are most skilled at engaging new members. Part of the reason that Michelle and I are so happy to come and talk to lovely folks like you, as part of, we'd love to meet you all and say hello to you all too, but is that we want more people to know about citizen science so that they can be looking for these opportunities. But you're right, Peter, sometimes the message doesn't get to everybody. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is to think about how we can connect better with community groups, with schools, with different organizations such as your own, so that you might be, we might not be able to partner you exactly with that project, Peter, but so that you'd be more aware of those things happening and maybe looking for them in your own local area, if that makes any sense.
I've spoken to a few frazzled parents with schooling in lockdown. Are you kind of getting the word out to them with projects to do?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I'll leave Michelle to answer that first of all, as somebody who has 2 young citizen scientists at home with her, and then perhaps I'll jump in with some research that we're doing at the University of Sydney.
Yep. Sure. So the best way to do that is the STAR portal. Now, we actually worked with the Office of the Chief Scientist a couple of years ago to organise this one. So anyone, I'll just put the link in the chat, starportal.edu.au. This one, we've actually put citizen science projects on there. You can do at home with kids. You can also find it with your via our website as well, via our project finder. I do push stuff out every week on our social media channels about citizen science projects you can do on it with kids. I call it Teacher Tuesday. So it's aimed at whether or not you're teaching from home or teaching in a school or homeschooling. These are the things you can do with kids today. Now get them out of the house. We were actually on a meeting today with our national coordinator who's in lockdown in Jindabyne with her kids, and she'd actually taken them out to the snow today to actually measure how deep the snow was as a citizen science project. So she was doing that as part of her homeschooling, but getting the kids out at the same time. So they were going on their walk and measuring snow with a ruler. So yeah, it really does depend on what you want to do with it.
But it actually feel like that data was needed for other people wanting to know the results of the kids going out and measuring the snow.
There's actually a lot of schools doing citizen science. Epping Boys, I think it's Epping Boys High in Melbourne, actually has their own citizen science project page that they're doing. They're doing air quality monitoring. So you can go onto their website and look at what their air quality is. They actually have a Twitter feed that tells you every hour on the hour what the wind temperature, the rain and the temperature and everything is. It's really cool. But they are using that data then as part of their statistical analysis classes in math to figure out, what is the average rainfall? What is the average, wind velocity? So yeah, all these things. And then they're feeding that back into the Bureau of Meteorology.
Wow.
So yeah, this can all happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about often it's about designing ways for people to take part and to gather data that is useful. Kirsten, that's part of back to the 10 principles, that you want the data that's being gathered by citizens to be useful. And so there might be a pilot stage where there's a little bit of working out what's useful and how to measure it best, and working out, for example, what the error bar might be. So for example, if you think about something like air quality monitoring, there are some very sophisticated, quite expensive devices for monitoring air quality, but they are spread around, and there'll be certain sites in every city, but they will only capture the air quality in those locations, for example. So we might be missing, well, we certainly are missing some data from other locations. But if we're using very cheap and cheap is a good thing in this instance. You know, if we're using something that's quite affordable for students to use in schools, for example, you want to understand what the error would be in the measurement of certain air quality measures, for example. So that's really important. Some of the things that we're doing in our research group at the University of Sydney, and we're hoping to expand this beyond New South Wales to Victoria and Queensland and other places, is to try and understand how we can better integrate citizen science as part of the Australian science curriculum, because we strongly believe that, just as Michelle was mentioning that one project, some young people aren't necessarily engaged in science, and that makes us feel a little bit sad as scientists. But we think it's sometimes because they don't get to be involved in real research, and that if you give them a challenge that's about their community, you can find it could be air quality monitoring, it could be watching the birds in their backyards, it could be looking for fungi, it could be something that taps into the interests of those young people. You can use citizen science as a jumping off point for a whole range of other teaching. So, for example, Michelle was mentioning, doing statistical analysis, teaching them mathematical skills. You can also think about storytelling or painting or drawing. You can think about theatre. You can teach them to make up drama performances linked to the data that they found. There's a whole different way of trying to engage young people in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but without, maybe taking the textbooks away for an afternoon and letting them go outside into their environment and better understand where they live and where they're studying.
And I also mentioned weather systems before. The Bureau of Meteorology also has the WOW, which is the Weather Observations website, where if you have a weather thermometers and so forth in your house, how some people have the what's the word I'm looking for here? The
weather station.
Rain
weather
gauge
stations, weather stations, then you can actually hook it up to their system. Or there's another one called Weather Underground, which is worldwide. And they actually use the Weather Underground stuff to predict a lot of events as well. So yeah, it's like a backup system.
Wait, Weather Underground?
Weather Underground. So with Weather Underground, it's an international consortium. They have recommended, I think, certain particular weather stations, but if you have one at home, you can put it up, and you can, if it's one of the ones that Bluetooth to your computer, which a lot of them do now, or Wi-Fi to your computer, or use your home Wi-Fi, you can actually set that up and put it in. I've put the link in the chat for W Underground, it's called, and it will actually, I'll have to share my screen again. Let me just jump out of a few of these. So this is Weather Underground. You've got the Weather Station Network, which will show you all the weather stations in the world. Currently, for some reason, I'm at Mission Beach, go figure. You can also, it says in here how to, there we go, 250,000 weather stations worldwide. So that's something you can do. You can join the network. And it tells you here how to connect to weather station. You can also have webcams so people can see what the weather's like at your place if you really want them to. And also you can connect air quality sensors as well. So that's one way.
Michelle, you mentioned you were a scout leader.
Yes.
I'm not up with the modern scout. I'm a scout leader, but I'm not up with all this new stuff. Would this be something that you could put out to the Scout Association that they could do as one of their things they have to do? As I said, I'm not up with it. I hope the Chief Commissioner's not watching.
Yeah, so like I said, I'm actually, and this is just between you, me, and 80 of our closest friends, I'm actually a Joey leader, and I'm also part of the branch. Ask me occasionally when they want to do citizen science stuff as well. So what we do in Scouts is we actually get the kids to use our naturalist, and we will do moth night, or we will do a And we put up a white sheet, you know, just one out of your cupboard, big white sheet, turn off all the lights and shine a light up on it at night. And we'll leave it for an hour or two and let the moths gather. And then we'll go out and we'll actually take photos of what the moths we've got. And this is a way where we're introducing the kids to what's around at night. And so they're not as, particularly for the younger ones, a lot of them are scared of the dark. And if we can show them what's actually out there, they actually get a lot more fearless when it comes to going camping and so forth as well. So for many kids who have perhaps are on spectrums and so forth and have fears, this is the easiest way we've found to actually get over those fears as well. We also then use it as a teaching mechanism. You know, what we might find in, say, September using a moth night is not the same thing we might find in, say, February, because different moths are out at different times. And then we can also tell them about the difference between moths and butterflies and all the rest of it as well. So does anyone know the difference between a moth and a butterfly? I didn't either before I did citizen science. So this is something I've learned. So moths have like the feathery antennas, the very feathery antennas, whereas butterflies will have club at the end of their antennae. And there are night butterflies and there are day moths. So yeah, things you've learned when you're doing citizen science. So yeah, is there any other queries for anyone? Someone's asked, how does a camera trap work? So a camera trap is basically a motion sensitive camera that someone sticks on a tree or on a pole or something like that. Sometimes they're baited. They're currently doing quoll surveys here in Queensland, and they're putting a bait up and then having the camera trap underneath it, because they actually want to see if the females are pregnant with babies as they reach up to grab the food. So as the quoll reaches up, it's taking a photo of her pouch to see what she's got in it. So yeah, there's a no. Peter said butterfly wings rest vertically. No, they've actually found that's not true anymore. That may be true in the Northern Hemisphere, but we're Southerners, apparently it's not true here. 8-0. I don't understand what 8-0 is. Anyone else? Any questions? Feel free to unmute and ask. Did we go too fast? Did we? We tried not to.
No, I think you've done extremely well. I can see the second polls up there for you to see. I forget what the first two were, whether that's just a change. Now, I'll have to try and do this myself, but I think for those of you, Michelle's put up a lot of links there, but you can, down the bottom right-hand side of the chat, you can click on it and you can save the chat, which will have all the links on it. So any of you that were interested in any of the links that Michelle put up, you know, thank you. Well, if there's no further questions, Michelle and Alice, thanks very much. I certainly appreciate it. I learned quite a bit. I didn't realise how much the citizens contributed to science. I certainly haven't contributed much in my lifetime, but thank you very much. Normally, if you were at Moorabbin, I would give you both a bottle of wine. The Treasurer has authorised me to fly to Brisbane and Sydney to personally hand you that bottle of wine, and I would be happy to do it on the weekend, but our Premier's just locked me down for another 3 weeks. So rather than waste it, just think of me on Saturday night drinking your bottle of wine.
It sounds like that might be the start of the MelbPC Users Citizen Science Wine Club. Perhaps you could start it off for us, Peter.
Well, the President was interested, so maybe he and I can share the bottle and enjoy ourselves. But look, thank you once again. It was most enjoyable.
Thanks for having us.
Yes,
yes, thanks for having us.
As you can't see everyone, getting a lot of applause there from everyone. So we're going to have a slight break, and we're going to have some 5 minutes of music, Ain't Misbehaving. I think, I'm not too sure who sang that, and Blue Danube, I think that's a waltz. So if it is the waltz, you can grab your partner and flirt around the floor, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So have a break, have a drink, have some sustenance, whatever, and we'll see you back in 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Peter. Just put in the chat, happy to answer any questions in the chat too while you're having a break or we'll listen to music. Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Alice. It was very interesting.
Thank you so much. Good evening. We'll leave you to your waltzing, I think.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
As soon as we're able to move around, I'm going to have a meeting with a guy at the Brunswick Library of Things and find out a bit more about how they do stuff. But there's not a great deal we can do about that at the moment. Something has come up. It was actually brought to my attention by John Swale. There are a lot of scams going around all the time. There are some particularly insidious ones at the moment, which are around vaccines and vaccine certificates and all that sort of stuff, which people may possibly fall for. I know all our members are very computer savvy, but nevertheless, they're easy to fall for some of those. So I've just put a link up on the chat for the Australian government scam watch. And as I was sort of looking into that this afternoon, it struck me, if you get anything with a link in it, if it says .gov.au, it's going to be safe. Anything else, you can't be totally sure of. So be careful, guys, what you click on in emails and SMSs and all that sort of stuff. It could turn out to be very expensive if you click the wrong thing. And that's about all I've got actually. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hand over to Harry Lewis, who's sitting there looking very serious, and he's going to give you an update on the state of the transition to Google. No point in me just being an intermediary on that. So over to Harry to tell us about the transition.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're coming to an interesting juncture in our operation of migrating our cloud services from Microsoft to Google. I'm going to start by reeling off a few numbers, which you don't have to remember, but it just gives you a feel for the scale of the operation and where we've got to. So, as I checked this evening, we have just over 1,400 members. Of those members, over 1,200 already have accounts in the new Google service. Of those accounts, sorry, I beg your pardon, those of the membership, that's the number that have accounts in Microsoft. So just short of 200 members don't, and most of the ones that don't are actually family members. So if you think of that number of 1,250, that's the potential for us to migrate to the new service. Already set up are just short of 1,000, 988. On their way, there's a batch that's currently being processed, and I'll talk a bit about the process in a moment, are another 275. And there's a small number of 36 whom we are currently contacting because they have 2 accounts in Microsoft, and we're asking them whether they want to keep both. As it happens, those last 3 numbers add up to more than the 1,250, as I mentioned, of member accounts in Microsoft. And the reason for that is that there are accounts that are assigned to members And that's to say the Microsoft record tells us which members currently responsible, but they're not personal accounts. They're things like SIG accounts, of which there are about 40. So we've actually sent an invitation to log in to over 1,000 members, and 720 have logged in Microsoft, in Google. So the gap between those two is actually 400. There were 400 members who have received the invitation but haven't yet logged in. And I have a word for them in a moment. The short form of the message is that the vast majority of members with working email accounts in Microsoft already have their new destination ready for them. And most of those have received their invitation. Not quite so many have actually acted on it. I'll stay there with email for a moment. I think most of you, because most of you are in the larger group there, I think, have already understood what we actually do. What the transition team does is to copy your Microsoft mailbox in its entirety to the new service. Now, the entirety is the entirety of what's in the cloud on the server. So if you're among the substantial number of members who are using POP to manage your email, most of the email that you have on your computer is not being migrated. And you get a little bit of a shock when you go to the new service if you're not careful, because you see a lot of emails you thought you deleted. The reason for that is that what gets migrated is the inbox in the cloud. And if you haven't been pruning it, things you've deleted on your computer have sat cheerfully in the cloud, resting on the cotton wool, and have been moved to the new service. In addition to that, we set your Microsoft account to forward everything that's new to the new account. So what you get is a snapshot of your mailbox and the inbox topped up. Now we're in sight now. In fact, the light is stronger than I thought even a week ago, to changing the instruction that our backroom exports give to the world to direct new mail to accounts at melbpc.org.au to the Google service. Up to now, all that new mail arrives at your Microsoft mailbox first and is forwarded by that setting that many of you have seen because it pops up if you log in on the web. Once we direct it to the Google service, no more new mail will arrive in your Microsoft mailbox. So if you're among the 400 that hasn't yet availed yourselves of the new service login, you will stop seeing the latest mail. Now we shall send around a mail out. The mail outs, by the way, go to your preferred email address. It's the same address as we use for the club mail outs. This is actually a particular item of data in the membership database and always has been. There's always been a field specifically for your preferred mail, which may or may not be the MelbPC address that you also have. I want to say a little about the other services, because as we come out of this tunnel, we get into some rather interesting, the tunnel ends in a jungle. And the name of the jungle is OneDrive. And in the OneDrive jungle, we provide you with a toolbox. It may contain a machete, it may contain a hand-powered chainsaw, which you have to hold with your hand, right? It may contain a hacksaw. You'll have a choice of tools, but it will be up to you to move the data that you're currently storing in your OneDrive to a new place. To get a sense of the scale of that, I just looked at how busy our OneDrives are. According to Microsoft, just under 300 members have actually logged in to their OneDrives in the past year. I'm slightly skeptical about that number. There are a lot more OneDrives than that have got data in them, because I'm not sure whether Microsoft counts as a login when you're using the desktop client. Somebody here may know and be able to tell me. Perhaps slightly more interesting is something about the size of members' OneDrives. And most of you who are keen OneDrive users will know where to look. On a recent report, just 36 OneDrives are holding more than 15 gigabytes of data. I chose that as an arbitrary checkpoint because, as most of you know, the Google Workspace drive has a capacity of 30 gigabytes. We've been slimming from Microsoft to Google, so we're slimmer and fitter, which means that for a proportion of members, the other thing is, in Google fashion, which again many of you will know about, Google lumps together email and files. So the same Google Drive holds all your email and all the contents, all the files you store in the Google Drive. My personal Gmail is using up 11 gigabytes, which I hope none of you has got as much as that, but that's not my MelbPC one, that's my personal one. Email, if you don't delete a lot, does grow rather. So when it comes to it, we'll be offering the toolbox to members, and including in the toolbox will be a reminder of where to look to find out how much of your storage you are using. Google is very generous with information about this, but you need to be checking. Already there's the transition team is still sharply focused on email until we get through roughly there's 300 odd more accounts just to send out to members. So we're not in the game yet of showing you that toolbox because too many people are still in the tunnel. But once we present the toolbox, it will be up to members to decide what to do. This topic has been pretty thoroughly discussed in Yammer. He says, if you can find it, because it's not always easy to find historic threads in Yammer. But very roughly, yes, you may be able to move it to your new storage. You may, if you wish, just dump it into a disk on your desktop. There are other cloud services, and this is why we can't tell members what to do. It's quite a different situation from email. As far as MelbPC is concerned, we're responsible for your MelbPC mailbox. We're giving it a new place, and we're doing the heavy lifting for you by moving your mail there. That's all MelbPC's responsibility. Now, we are responsible for allowing you to have the OneDrive, but there's no comparable service that we know of that automatically moves OneDrives from A to B. There's a third-party one that's free up to 30 gigabytes a month called MultCloud. But for example, some of us, including myself, are now paying Microsoft for the personal Microsoft 365 product, which puts Word, Excel, PowerPoint, OneNote on our desktops. And that brings with it a 1 terabyte OneDrive, which is exactly the size of the one we're getting from Microsoft through the enterprise service we're getting at the moment for all members. So you will then have a possible destination for your MelbPC OneDrive. The only challenge there is how you move the data. And we can talk about that in a minute if anyone would like to, but the issue is rather similar to the issue with email. If you want to move email from one cloud store to another, what do? Well, you can't throw a mooring rope from one cloud to another. No, clouds won't take the strain. You have to get your cloud to rain on the ground, and then it has to evaporate up to another cloud. Or to use a slightly less fanciful metaphor, you can do it on your desktop if you've got the right tools there. But if you're moving hundreds of gigabytes, this is going to take time. And that's where it's going to be tempting for you to use a service that will actually move cloud to cloud. These do exist. Okay. Finally, I'll just mention Yammer, which, because basically the three personal services we're getting from Microsoft are the email package, contacts and calendar if you're using them, the OneDrive, and Yammer, which is a very active SIG. In the last 3 months, 405 members logged into Yammer. The number of postings per member ranged from 1 to 602. The number of readings, however Microsoft counts them, runs from 11 to 5,459. So somebody in our membership has read over 5,459 posts. I'm not exactly sure how they do the metric, but it's not terribly hard to make some guesses who's up there with the big numbers if you visit Yammer frequently. Now, in this case, MelbPC's responsibility is primarily to provide a new forum, and there are candidates in the wings, and I'm not going to say more about that because I'm not completely up to date, but I'm pretty confident there's at least one candidate that will fulfill very much the function of Yammer. The one thing that is still being worked on in the background, and I'm not sure where we've got to, is how easy or difficult it might be, for example, to export all of your posts so you can keep your own posts forever. I think the tools that Microsoft provides are not perfect for this. It's not, Yammer is like these other social media tools. They're not in the business of using the same data format so that you can easily move data between them, because they're not primarily designed to build an archive. They're basically, and Yammer was a buy-in by Microsoft. I mean, many of these tools grew, many of things in the Microsoft toolbox, somebody else invented, they bought it out. A good example of that, a recent one, is the Outlook app for mobiles, which was about 4 years ago, didn't belong to Microsoft at all. The one we've got now. Okay, so there is a question which we haven't answered yet about how easy it might be for you to preserve your carefully curated posts and possibly the threads they landed in. But we're very confident indeed there will be an acceptable replacement to Yammer, and also that this will be explored and finally chosen with the full cooperation of the Yammer community. The final major function of Microsoft for us is to provide the login we use for our other services. And under current conditions, that login is to WordPress. And many of you will have noticed the WordPress login popping up when you started accessing these services, which include the member profile in the membership database, online renewal. In the last 12 months, 560 members renewed online, and also access to the most fascinating reading that MelbPC can provide, namely old committee minutes. So those of you who are amusing yourselves with some light reading during lockdown will be familiar with finding the committee minutes on the website, but you do need the login. And that login is spin-off from the Microsoft service. Google does the same thing, and we shall be moving that to Google. That's to say, it's called single sign-on when we have a login for service A that works for service B. Almost everybody here has experienced starting off with a new internet service and being offered to log in using their Gmail account, or possibly a Microsoft account or a Facebook account. And these are examples of the single sign-on, where the owner of one service gives other people permission, usually commercial entities permission at a price to use their doorkeeper for access. So we're using our Microsoft service as a doorkeeper to our private areas, and that will move over. I'm not predicting when exactly the different switches will be thrown. In the case of two of these, there's a straightforward switch that MelbPC controls. There's a switch of where your email arrives first. It's called an MX record in the DNS area, and the actual action is a pretty simple one. And you can look on the web if you've got even more time. When you've finished reading committee minutes, you can look on the web and look up the DNS settings of any domain at all on the planet. This information is public, and it has to be, because when you send an email to johnsmith@johnsmith.com.au, for that to find his private domain, that information has to be available to every server on the planet. It's an amazing system, that. The other switch is about the single sign-on. We will, not I, for goodness sake, the transition team at some point will switch your MelbPC login from Microsoft to Google, but that can only happen once you've all got your new accounts. But what I said at the beginning was we're very close to that now. So I think, yes, I think I've mentioned the primary actions. Okay, let me summarize what members need to do if they haven't already done it. Okay, first off, find the email we sent to you. If you're not already using the Google service, I ought to have a single magic keyword that's in the subject name of all of these, because we were starting this nearly a year ago now. And there are a few members going back to last October who still haven't logged in. So you need to find the email. And if necessary, you can get a new temporary password. You can come to iHelp, or you can email transition at. So if you're in the 400 who hasn't logged on yet, see if you can find the email. Shortly, we shall send an email to everybody who's in the game at all with a new copy of the email as well. So you won't have to go hunting the old one. And we have polished it up a bit since some of you received yours. Moving to OneDrive, even before some of us get out of the tunnel, if you have treasured files in OneDrive, then it's high time to think about what you're going to do with them. Have a look at how much storage you're using, and remember that you need to have email and OneDrive files within 30 gigabytes. If you're well within 30, then you're in business. You're just going to have to need to move it from one to the other. And that can be done on your desktop in much the way you can do it for email. If you're in the hundreds, as one or two distinguished colleagues who are in this meeting are, you have to think of doing something else. And in a way, the least demanding thing to do is to download the lot onto a disk, probably an external disk, of course. If you're into hundreds of gigabytes on your desk, there are other solutions. But that's going to be up to you. The sooner you can get on with it, the easier it's going to be for you. With respect to Yammer, when I think we haven't had a formal decision yet about this, but I think the transition team will want to get everybody the toolbox for OneDrive before we move to Yammer. But then it'll be a matter of presenting what I hope will be a choice of a couple of services for Yammer friends to test and decide which one to use. And then that will be, one way or another, it will be put behind the single sign-on. It's not likely, in my view, to be a Google service. Google doesn't seem to have anything that matches what Yammer does, but we'll still use the single sign-on, so you won't need a separate username and password. Now, I know there are other members of the team present in this meeting. So first of all, I'll be very grateful if any other member of the team would like to come in, correct anything I said or amplify anything, and then we'll take questions on that, and then we'll move on. I'm looking at the watch. We've still got a few minutes left. Would any member of the team like to say anything? I can only see one screen full, so I can't tell. I can see one member there. He knows who he is. I can see two. Yes, but then I see a lot of names, and I have to read names very quickly. I can see two members of the team. Third screen, right. So I'm going to take that. So any questions at all based on what I just said, folks?
All of the transition emails that I've received and my family account members have received have all gone into the trash folders automatically. And if I'm not looking for them, because I pop my email, they just get missed.
No, there's a simple solution to that. We have to put in the email, please look in the trash.
But if you don't get the email because it's gone into the trash, how are you going to know to look there? This doesn't happen to everybody. And it's my, look, as a matter of interest, I can't see who asked the question because I'm not sure who was speaking then, but. It's Sean.
Oh, Sean, oh well. How are you filtering for trash, Sean?
I'm not, it's just the auto default filters in the Microsoft thing. They're all just dropping straight into the junk mail email folders. So, and that's happened to all three family accounts.
That is kind of weird, isn't it?
Microsoft sees it comes from a Microsoft service. So yes, ...
Well, that should, as long as it's coming in. Yeah, of course, that's one of the questions. Is it coming into a Microsoft account, Sean?
Well, isn't that where you're sending the initial transition email?
It goes to whatever you've said is your preferred email.
Yeah.
So because I don't get why. Let's say take the easy.
They're all MelbPC accounts.
Yeah, we're sending effectively. We're sending from the Microsoft server. It's a slightly more complicated thing because you have to register your emailer. We're using the Civi CRM mailer, right? Civi Mail, and that isn't as such using a Microsoft SMTP server, I think, but you have to sign up with Microsoft, which we've done. But the main point is, as far as I know, most of our members using their MelbPC account are not receiving them in their spam folder. So go figure why that should happen, because I don't know. Any offers? There are members present who have much deeper understanding of spam filters than I have. You see why I asked you that, Sean, though, because let's say some members are still using Mailwasher, for example. Now, I don't know what happens with Mailwasher, so but really you would expect the same AI loaded spam police doing the same job on exactly the same email to come up with the same solution, wouldn't you? Conclusion.
You'd think so.
Yeah.
It's obviously not happening that way, though.
What we might well do, and in fact, look, we do, you know, that provided the member has a mobile number on their record, we are sending the password by SMS. So maybe that's the point to look at too, and add a note, say, please check spam if necessary or something. We don't want to overload that because it's meant to be short and sweet, the SMS message. But maybe we should be, it just says, look where you normally receive your MelbPC email. And maybe we can reword that to help people check the spam if necessary.
Well, that's how I know that you've sent them out, because both accounts either point to myself or my partner's phone.
Yeah.
And when that popped up, I knew that I had to go looking for it because it just wasn't in the inbox.
Yeah, so in a sense, it worked well for you. But then it was in a sense preaching to the converted in your case.
Yes.
And not all members have quite ascended to the high level of understanding of these systems that you have, Sean. So
it's not only MelbPC stuff though that ends up in the junk box. There's all sorts of stuff can go there, and you've just got to get used to looking at your junk mail box as a second inbox. Yes,
you do, Barry, and that's where our friends with POP have an interesting dialogue with us, because of course they don't see automatically what Microsoft or Google prospectively has already decided is junk before it gets to the inbox.
Well, I've got mine all my emails come through to my Outlook on the desk, not outlook.com.
Yeah.
And so the junk box, I've just got that alongside the inbox.
Oh, so but you're not using POP then?
Oh, some of them are POP. Yeah, and I'm sure they are.
Why?
But the only difference, I just look at them both as inboxes.
Yeah,
but if you want to do something with the stuff that's in the junk box, you just got to drag it into the inbox.
No, fair play, fair play. So I'll say about that one, without, you know, we can wander down different forks in the rabbit warren very easily here, Barry, but I think it's true. I'm not swearing this for Microsoft Exchange, but I'm pretty confident for IMAP that if you move it from spam or junk to the inbox in a program like Outlook or Thunderbird, the message doesn't get back to Microsoft or to Google. Now, I'm saying this because I'm always open to correction on this, but in other words, I think if you want to educate the spam police, they are teachable, these people. They're not prejudiced. So they can learn from what we do, but I think we have to do it where they can see it.
Well, I just think keep it simple. So long as you've got your junk box alongside your inbox.
Yeah, yeah. But then I think you must be, with Microsoft, you're quite probably using Exchange if you've got Outlook, or IMAP if you've got Thunderbird. With Google,
I'm just using Outlook. The desktop Outlook.
Yeah, but the Outlook on your desktop will be set for POP or for Exchange probably. And the default is
certainly not Exchange.
Okay, if you say so.
Well, I'd have to look at them, but I'm pretty sure so.
I mean, if anyone today were to go to Outlook on the desktop and just give them their MelbPC email address, it would install it as an Exchange account without asking you.
Okay.
But never mind. I mean, the point we have had in the support team, we've had this discussion with a few members, and I think this came up in Yammer first as well. You can actually decide to disable the spam filter by putting a rule in. A slightly more complicated one came up in Yammer the other day, where somebody had gone to the trouble listing every domain on the planet by the country suffix and saying none of these is spam. But I believe that in the Google one anyway, you can simply say any message containing the symbol, any sender containing the symbol @ shouldn't send it to spam. Okay. And of course, every email address on the planet contains the symbol @.
Yeah. Well, the point I was making is that because stuff is going to end up in your junk box, coming from all sorts of different sources.
Yeah.
It's not a problem that you can solve it. We can solve it. The sending end.
No.
The receiver.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The receiver's got to be able to manage their.
Yeah. No. I'm fully with you, Barry. And the main point you're making, which I fully endorse, is we all need to be watching our spam folders.
That's right. It's our problem, not yours.
Yes, because we can't. Within limit, there are very tight limits within which we can change the behavior of the spam police. So of course, these are, I believe, there are suites. It's an artificial intelligence situation because it's learning from experience all the time. And we can help educate it directly by moving things out of spam, but members are often saying, I've done it 3 times and it's still sending the stuff to spam. The other thing you can do is what we used to call whitelisting, and now we're supposed to call allow listing. You can nominate a class of email that isn't to go into spam. And that, I think, does work, but it only works for the class you've nominated.
Well, it seems to me that if you can put your inbox and your junk box, you know, move them so they're there,
yeah,
then stuff will mail will come into one or the other, and you don't really care.
No, I fully accept that. It's just the hypothesis of your conditional, if you can see them together, and I don't believe users of POP can do that.
Well,
a slightly different question, Harry.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
For that, you said to go searching your inbox for that invitation email from some time ago.
Yeah.
But you also need to go searching supposedly in your SMS files for the password. In my case, they're months apart.
No, fair play. No, who can do that? No.
It's probably easier just to request a new password, isn't it?
The main, of course it is. Of course it is. My main problem is that I know that there is still, on the last count, 300, I'm looking at the figure of 329, aren't I? Yes, 330 accounts that aren't there yet, right? So there are members, I mean, maybe we need to think about more than one mail out here. Certainly, as soon as they're all out there, so as soon as we're confident the email has been sent out to everybody who's using MelbPC email, we're going to send a mail out to those people at whatever address they've told us to write to, because we're starting the process that'll end in switching the MX setting, okay? At the moment, there will be some members who haven't seen that. Maybe the thing to do is, because we're so close now, is to send a mail out to all the ones who are already migrated, but haven't logged in. Because we know who they are. We know who they are by their email address, because we just look it up in the recording for that, and saying, get on and do it. And here's a copy of the mail. And if you want to get a password, just contact us and we'll give you it.
Harry, Philip
yes.
here.
Hi, Philip.
Part of the problem of messages coming from Civi going to spam is that Civi sets the precedent bulk. It's an email header. And a lot of spam filters say if you're getting bulk email, it's probably spam.
Yeah. And there's nothing we can do about that, is there? I mean, there's
maybe, but I don't know.
I mean, Rob's here. Rob can possibly raise this with audience where, I mean, if there's a way of, I mean, what does MailChimp do? I mean, does that get bulk mail on its headers?
Haven't looked.
Because they have a number of clever tricks. I mean, we tried and failed to use MailChimp for mail outs about 4 years ago, and they could never tell us what we'd got wrong. And one thing they do is use lots of different IP addresses, for example. So your mail out might come from several different sources, so that they're not loading them, because they're built to say 20,000 out or 30,000, you know, and hope to get them to everybody. But because all of ours are coming from a single IP address, I assume.
I have a customer that sends out about 50,000
right
every couple of months from MailChimp.
Yeah.
But, I'll look at the headers tomorrow.
Yeah, because I assume we get reporting from Civi Mail who has read the message, and I assume that will be correct. In other words, that depends on a message getting back to the server from some clever trick that's put into the mail, doesn't it? That sends something back. So I assume that
usually, Harry, that usually depends on an invisible pixel in the mail message itself.
No, I understand that.
Some people have their readers actually set to not show graphics.
Yeah, no, fair play. All I was going to say was I assume that if we do get that, then we can be confident it was actually delivered. Not we can be confident it wasn't delivered if we don't get it. Because there are people, and this has been discussed in Yammer too, who, and in fact it's the default in Microsoft Outlook, not to download graphics. And that pixel is a graphic, I think.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. Right.
Harry,
No, yeah, yes.
a very simple question. You keep talking about OneDrive. You, like a number of us, have subscribed to Office 365, where you get this 1 gigabyte.
Yes.
There's also a 1 gigabyte OneDrive in the enterprise package that you're
Correct.
Going to cancel in the near future.
Yes.
Not personally, naturally.
Yeah.
Now, if you have, how do you know that your own personal OneDrive from Office 365 is
Yes.
cancelled? At present, you and I have both got
Yeah.
OneDrives, each of a gigabyte.
Yeah.
Terabyte.
I have stuff in my personal one.
Yeah.
And I've emptied out the one that it's going to be cancelled.
Yes.
If I had stuff in it, and in fact I have it in my personal one, how do I know that instructions aren't given to Microsoft and they cancel my personal OneDrive, or it is used by whoever in what you're talking about, the stuff that's going into OneDrive? And I'm sure it's not even OneDrive's name. You keep talking, it's a Google product, so it obviously has some other name.
Hang on, I'm not entirely sure I'm following you, David. The OneDrive, these different bits and bobs, I mean, a mailbox,
yes,
a list of contacts, a calendar, a OneDrive are all part of a package associated with a particular email address, which is how the account is identified, right?
Yes.
Now, I think it is theoretically possible. Well, the short answer to your question is we won't, MelbPC won't disable your OneDrive without telling you, first point.
Right.
No way.
I think that answers my question. If I get a message from you,
yeah,
it's up to me to make very, very sure that you are not cancelling my personal OneDrive.
No, I think there's a toolbox that the administrators have that was going to be used to cancel email access, and that hasn't happened for different reasons. The main thing that's going to happen about email is that certainly has to happen, so it's going to happen, is that the new mail is going to come to the new place. But we're going to send you instructions on that, and there'll certainly be a few days of grace before we disable anyone's access to email in the old system, because we have to keep the old system running for individual members who are using either the OneDrive or Yammer, David.
Yes. And
we can't, I already mentioned this earlier, working assumption before we get to this point is that everybody, every member, individual member with an individual member's account in Office 365 will have an account in the Google service.
Yes.
And we shall be badgering the ones who haven't logged in.
Yep.
I promise you, and them. Okay.
I'll put my hand up and say I am one, because
that's okay. Yeah.
I've asked one question there.
Yeah.
The question is, if I don't want to have Google, I understand it goes to the Google server. Can I pull it straight out of the Google server into a browser, whether it's Edge or Thunderbird or whatever?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, the browser is an interface to the server, right? So in any browser, you can access your Google Mail, you can access your Google Drive, just as you can access your Microsoft Mail and your OneDrive.
Yes. Can you bypass them and go direct to the Google server?
Well, you and I can't.
Oh,
I mean, the browser interface, effectively, you're looking at the server.
Yeah.
When you're using a client program, and this exists for OneDrive and for Google Drive as well as for email, you're looking through a glass darkly, as it were. In the normal case, if we take IMAP Exchange, or we take the client programs for Microsoft OneDrive or for Google Drive, it's synchronizing with the server. So there are 2 copies of everything, right? Yeah. So in a sense, conceptually, you're looking at the server if it's completely synchronized, but they're actually mirroring. They're mirroring, okay? To keep it simple, it's slightly more complicated than that because you can be selective. So if you're not being selective, they're going to mirror each other, okay?
Because I've opened in a trial a new account with a new email address.
Yeah.
I was able to locate it and use it directly from the browser. I didn't using anything else.
Yeah.
To the browser, and that is a wonderful thing if you can do that with Google.
Oh, sure. They're all in this game, but I mean, it's time anyway, isn't it? But never mind extracting ourselves from this particular sub-branch of the rabbit warren, David. I believe that one of the greatest assets of the world of cloud drives is the desktop client that comes in the package. I've got Dropbox, 2 Microsoft OneDrives. I've got, as it happens, an iCloud drive that I don't use very much on my desktop. And these look like ordinary folders. They synchronize their contents with the cloud. So, I mean, look, Windows comes with it. Anyone who's got a recent new copy of Microsoft Windows has been effectively, until they changed the defaults, been saving stuff to the OneDrive, because Microsoft moved the default destination for saving from documents to OneDrive. Exactly when, Dave will tell me if I look at him hard enough, but I think it was sometime in Windows 8, and it wasn't in Windows 7, but it's part of this revolutionary or evolutionary movement of services off our desktop into the cloud. So all the big boys like us to use their storages and their cloud tools, but then they give back some of what they've taken away by giving us these client programs. And all this is depending on a far higher level of interaction with the cloud, with the internet, than we had, say, even 10 years ago, let alone 30.
Harry, look, I'll just say thank you. I won't monopolise your time because I know there's plenty of other people who want to ask you questions and things.
Well, I ought to say, because I wasn't watching the clock, I'm sorry about that. I was so confident I would take about 10 minutes, that it is past time and anyone is welcome to go off and have their cocoa. And I'm sure that one way or another, between us, whoever's left over can close the whole show. But so don't feel embarrassed. You can just put a cocoa cup on the screen and then go away and we'll think you're still with us.
Harry, I might butt in here, and you're right. It's we've gone 15 minutes over, but that's fair enough. I think it concerns, you know, you had to get the message across. You were next in line to be the iHelp speaker, but I think we'll give that a miss. I think we'll call the meeting to a close at 9:14. It's on my clock. Thank you all for the speakers, and Harry, you've explained quite a lot, and I wish you well with your 400 members that you're trying to get to transition. We'll see you all next month. I made a note here. There was 3 girl singers many, many years ago, and I said to my wife I should play that tonight, and the opening line of their song was "When Will I See You Again?" And I thought that that's getting to be a bit appropriate because the way things are going, I'm wondering when we will see you again, in the flesh, of course, that is. But good night. Harry may stay around for a while, and I think that anyone wishes to ask Harry, but good night, and thank you all for attending.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thank you.